Well, I can see Kosciuszko in the background. That's it, just up there. I'm absolutely exhausted. I don't know that I can make it. It's just taking me forever, taking 50 steps and having to stop for a few minutes. I'm going to try and keep going, but honestly, I don't know whether I can do it. In this activity, I challenged myself to hike the Summit Trail in Kosciuszko National Park, which is a rough and hilly track that winds its way for 12 kilometres from the ridge above Charlotte's Pass in a circle around the main peaks of the Kosciuszko area to the top of Australia's highest mountain, then for another 8 kilometres along a dirt road back to Charlotte Pass. On a good day, it presents a 6 to 7 hour trip for a fit trekker and an 8 to 9 hour trip for your average hiker. By world standards, Australia's highest mountain, Mount Kosciuszko, is just a bump on the landscape, largely indistinguishable on the skyline from the other mountains around it. At 2,228 metres, it's 1/4 the height of Mount Everest. Encapsulated well within its namesake national park, Mount Kosciuszko is a popular tourist destination in the summer months, although most visitors arrive at the base of the mountain the easy way, via a chairlift from the neighbouring Thredbo Valley Resort. In winter, the entire region is totally snowbound and only visited by the occasional cross-country skier. At the end of 2024, when I included this activity at the top of my Mindset Reset challenge list, I was reasonably fit for cycling and swimming, but as I hadn't done any serious walking in decades, I was extremely unfit for hiking any distance, especially on rough mountain trails. However, I calculated that if I started on a serious exercise regime, I could improve my fitness enough in 3 months to be able to complete the trek at the end of March. So I took advantage of the Boxing Day sales to buy myself a pair of sturdy hiking boots and, being the middle of a hot summer in Australia, I stopped cycling and started walking before dawn most mornings. But then, frustratingly, on 8th of January, I injured my back trying to pick up my trail bike after I accidentally dropped it during one of my other challenges, and I wasn't able to walk in any sort of rigorous way for another 3 weeks. When I started walking again in early February, I struggled to do so with any sort of enthusiasm. Having the wrong power-weight ratio for weight-bearing exercise, I was annoyingly slow, plus I had too much time to think, which wasn't good for my mental health. The first time I tried to walk up a reasonably steep hill, I failed to get any further than the base before I turned back towards home. And on it went, day after day, hiking down deserted roads in the dark, spewing hateful words about how much I hated walking. But stubborn determination paid off, and by early March, my walking fitness had improved enough to think I might be able to take on the challenge sometime in early April, before the weather turned cold. However, I needed to start carrying a pack because, whatever the weather on the Summit Trail, it was essential to carry food, water and survival gear. So I filled a backpack with books and set off the next day, but immediately went into shock at how much more difficult it was walking when carrying an extra 6 kilos of dead weight on my back. Here I am about 2 kilometres from home. I've decided to wear a backpack from now onwards. It's already mid-March and I've only got 2 weeks before my date to walk. I don't know about this walking. I do not like walking. In truth, I also had a more serious problem, a crippling hammer deformation that had slowly developed on the middle toe of my right foot. About 5 years previously, I'd become aware that the toe had gradually curled under, which was probably the result of the tendons under my foot shortening, which I eventually figured out grew as a result of my lack of regular rigorous walking. The toe itself didn't hurt, but when I walked, my sock quickly bunched up underneath the curled toe, which, in turn, put pressure on the ball of my foot. I was constantly aware of this pressure when I walked, and after a few kilometres, the pain was sufficiently unbearable to force me to stop, unlace my boot, and pull the sock out from under the toe. At great expense, I purchased hiking socks that were specifically shaped to right and left feet, but they made no difference. In fact, they were worse because they were thicker than my usual socks. By the end of March, I was still only walking 8 to 10 kilometres, and it was clear that I needed to significantly increase my walking distance. On 30th of March, I set out on a 13-kilometre circuit around Lake Burley Griffin's Central Basin, carrying a 6-kilo backpack. When I got home, I was pleased to have had no problems, although I was acutely aware that the hike had been on relatively flat ground, while the summit trail would be very steep in places. On 8th of April, I completed an 18-kilometre hike around the lake's west basin, and while this included a few small hills, it took only 3.5 hours, so I decided that I was fit enough to tackle the summit trail, although I figured that because I hadn't been to the Charlotte Pass area in over 30 years, a reconnaissance trip was essential. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm in Jindabyne. I have just driven up. I left at 5. It's 7 o'clock on Thursday morning. I think it's the 10th of April. I'm doing a reconnaissance for my Mount Kosciuszko hike. So let's go and see if there's somewhere open for coffee this early. As I describe in a recent video, there's only one road south from Canberra, the Monero Highway, which leads to Cooma, then on to the lakeside town of Jindabyne. With a permanent population of about 5,000 people and a tragically ugly lake, the banks of which were scarred decades ago when the lake was first filled, Jindabyne serves as a base camp for most of the New South Wales ski resorts: Thredbo, Charlotte Pass, Perisher Valley, Smigan Holes and Guthiga. I first went to Perisher Valley in my early teens to attend a horse riding summer camp at a lodge called Valhalla, then went back a few more times before taking up cross-country skiing in my late teens. For 3 years in my mid-20s, I carried out fieldwork for a PhD research project on the ecology of small mammals in the Smigan Holes region, then skied and hiked in the mountains for another 10 years until, sadly, life got in the way and I stopped going altogether. In December 2024, when I decided to hike the summit trail, with the exception of 2 motorbike trips down the Alpine Way, I hadn't spent any time in Kosciuszko National Park for over 20 years, so I was very keen to go back there. But my window of opportunity was closing rapidly as the weather in the mountains deteriorates in late April, and while it can snow at any time of the year, the chance of snow increases dramatically from early May onwards. I arrived at Charlotte Pass at about 8 that morning and set off down the steep track towards the Snowy River, where my first challenge lay, negotiating 2 sets of stepping stones. The trail up the ridge from the river was long and steep, and the higher I got, the more the weather deteriorated. It took me over an hour and a half just to get to the ridge above Blue Lake, where I stopped for a breather. Well, here I am. I'm up at Blue Lake. I've been walking for nearly 2 hours. The wind is ferocious. It's freezing cold. I'm not going all the way to Kosci today. This is just a reconnaissance trip. I'm going up to the ridge up there. The next section of track took me to a higher ridge with a stunning view down into Victoria. I'd planned to have a late breakfast there, but the wind was so wild that I decided to head back down and stop to eat in the relative shelter of the Blue Lake overlook. The hike back was of course much faster until I got to the steep slope up from the river to Charlotte Pass, which proved that I wasn't nearly as fit as I thought I was. Good morning, everyone. It is 6:50 a.m. on Wednesday, the 16th of April. It's taken me 3 hours to get here from Canberra. The fog was something terrible. It's it's one degree here. It was -5 a kilometre or 2 previously. Sorry, I should say where here is. I'm at Charlotte's Pass, about to do the full loop walk to Mount Kosciuszko, and it's a beautiful, beautiful sunny day, no wind, much better than it was when I did the reconnaissance on Thursday. So here we go. I set off from the Charlotte Pass parking area at 7:15 a.m. and headed down the steep trail with confidence, but at the Snowy River my determination withered and suddenly my chest muscles tightened with tension at the enormity of what lay ahead of me. My balance deserted me at the stepping stone crossing, and the only thing that got me over was the thought that I wouldn't have to come back this way again. I pushed on up the long, steep descent, but my pack was much heavier than on my reconnaissance trip, partly because I was carrying my wet weather gear instead of wearing it as I had on the reconnaissance, and partly because I had more food and water. The summit track varies dramatically in surface composition. The steepest parts were paved decades ago with tessellated cobblestones. However, some of these sections have deteriorated to the point that they are simply a mess of rubble. So here's an example of the cobblestone that the Kosciuszko management group have failed to maintain. And of course everyone's walking off to the side because it's hard enough to walk up, but it would be impossible to walk down. By the way, I seem to be the only one on the mountain so far. I paused briefly at Blue Lake to catch my breath and then pushed on up to the ridge above, where I sheltered behind some rocks and had a belated breakfast. From there, it was another hill climb to the top of Mount Kosciuszko, but the effort was worth it. When I got to Mueller's Pass, I'd been walking for 4.5 hours, so I stopped to have some more food and water and rest for a while. Although the track up the side of Kosciuszko looked steep, it wasn't any steeper than I'd climbed earlier in the morning, and I set off with renewed enthusiasm, but I was actually really tired. That's Kosciuszko behind me, and I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm already so tired. I just don't know whether I can make it up there. Up that mountain. I am just so unbelievably tired. A few hundred metres into the climb, I knew I was in trouble, though I didn't know why, other than the fact that the trail now had rock steps in it. All the food I'd had that day had been protein, but I just didn't have any energy. Worse than that, the pain in my chest came back, and, just like the day I swam in Lake Burley Griffin, it seemed possible I was about to have a heart attack. I honestly thought that, at the least, I was going to need to be airlifted to hospital. But not willing to be beaten, having come so far, I decided to break into my emergency rations. Miraculously, within minutes of eating a few of the sugary jellies, my energy levels increased sufficiently to get me to the trail junction with the summit road, which was a one-way hike to the top and back again. With massive relief, I dropped my backpack on the side of the road and tramped to the summit along with 100 other people. I hadn't hiked or skied to the top of Mount Kosciuszko for over 40 years, yet it was incredibly familiar, like visiting a friend from long ago. I didn't stay long, though. I much prefer to be on my own in places of such intense grandeur, plus I was mindful of the fact that I still had another 2 to 3 hours left of hiking, and my body was already protesting. Well, I'm at Spencer's Creek. I'm about halfway back from the base of Mount Kosciuszko to Charlotte's Pass. I'm in a lot of pain now. My ankles are absolutely burning. My toes are burning. and I'm feeling pretty sore all over, but hopefully I'll make it. While it's almost all downhill and a smooth gravel road, the 8 kilometres from the base of Kosciuszko back to my car at Charlotte Pass was both joyous and a test of endurance. But when I got there, all the pain melted away in the euphoria of still being able to hike the summit trail at age 70. Oh, I did it! I made it! 20 kilometres! Wow! Well, I did it. 8 hours, 20 kilometres, 20.2 kilometres. Very rugged, very rough mountain track. So pleased I did it, so relieved. To be finished now, I just have to head down to national parks and pay my day use fee that they wouldn't take this morning. Okay, feeling so good, so pleased, so good, so pleased with myself. It's just been an extraordinary day, absolutely extraordinary day. To think I hiked with really only about 2 months fitness. I only once walked 20 kilometres on the flat, and I did all that carrying a backpack, so pleased with myself. In addition to the life-saving lollies that vary in price depending on where you buy them, my 3 main expenses for this activity were firstly my new hiking boots, which I purchased at the sale price of $327. Secondly, petrol for 2 car trips of 440 kilometres each, which came to a total of about $160. And thirdly, 2 day passes for visiting Kosciuszko National Park, which were $17 each. In my next episode, I take on my 16th challenge in this series, learning to sail a yacht on Lake Burley Griffin without capsizing. For more information about living your own unlived life, if you go to my website, you can download a copy of my free book, Living Your Unlived Life, Finding Contentment by Honouring Your Dreams. And if it's your thing, you could like this video and subscribe to my channel.